The wind moaned low across the prairie, a mournful tune that slipped through the winter grass like a hymn hummed by ghosts. Snow had fallen through the night, blanketing the hills in a hush that swallowed sound, memory, and time itself. The kind of snow that made even a man's regrets seem small, buried under drifts of white silence. Elias McCrae stirred in his bed before the first light, same as every morning. He hadn't changed the rhythm of his days since the earth took his wife and their baby 2 winters back. There were chores to do, even if no one waited for him to finish them. The world spun on, indifferent to the hearts it broke. He swung his legs over the edge of the bed, joints creaking like old floorboards, and listened. There it was again. Not wind. Not the distant crack of a tree under frost. Something softer. A cry. Faint, like a lamb too weak to lift its head. He reached for his coat, still damp from yesterday's snow, and lit the lantern. The flame wavered, casting a flickering circle as he opened the cabin door. The cold bit deep, but Elias was used to that. What unsettled him wasn't the frost. It was the sound, thin and reedy, trailing off, then rising again. A cry that didn't belong to any animal he knew. His boots crunched through the snow as he made his way to the barn, heart ticking a little faster now. The sky hung low with clouds the color of unspoken sorrow. The barn loomed ahead, squat and weather-worn, the hinges groaning when he pushed the door open. The lantern light swept across the hay-strewn floor, and there, in the farthest stall, curled in upon herself like something broken and forgotten, lay a woman. She was wrapped in what looked like a horse blanket, edges stiff with frost. Beside her, swaddled in old rags and the last of someone's hope, was a baby. He didn't speak. Words didn't feel right just yet. The woman's eyes fluttered open. They were glassy, too bright. Fever had started its climb. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Only her arms shifted, pulling the child closer as if to say not them. Not this one. Please. Elias knelt, setting the lantern down. The child whimpered, a frail thread of life that tugged something deep in him. Without thinking, he reached for the woman. She tensed, but didn't fight him. She had no strength left for that. He lifted her first, then the baby, and carried them both into the snow. Inside the cabin, the fire had gone to embers. He set them near it, stoked the flames, then wrapped another quilt around the girl. The child, tiny, red-faced, squirming, was dry but cold. He fetched the kettle, warmed water, poured it into a stone bottle to tuck beside them. Only when warmth returned to the woman's cheeks did she finally speak. Juniper, she whispered, not looking at him. Her gaze stayed fixed on the child. Her name's Juniper. Elias nodded, though she hadn't asked for his approval. He sat across from them, elbows on his knees, watching the firelight dance along the lines of her face. She was young, 20 maybe. Dirt and desperation masked her beauty, but it was there, hidden beneath the days she must have walked alone. You got a name? He asked gently. She didn't answer. The child began to cry again. She held her to her chest, murmuring nonsense songs, the kind only mothers and God understood. Her hands shook. I'll boil some oats, Elias said, already moving. You need something, in you, if you're going to keep feeding her. The morning passed in silence. Elias worked, fed the goats, chopped more wood, shoveled the path. The rhythm of life refused to stop. But something had shifted. Like a room you thought was empty, now filled with breath. He found her asleep by midday, baby nestled beside her, both wrapped in layers of borrowed warmth. She'd used his old coat to cushion her back. He didn't mind. Didn't even think to mind. He studied her face in the stillness. Beneath the grime and exhaustion, there was a kind of strength. Not the loud, wild kind. The kind that stays after everyone else leaves. She stirred. Where'd you come from? He asked, voice low. South, she said after a moment. Walked most the way. Why? The woman's mouth twisted into something between a smile and a wince. Because there was nowhere else to go. He didn't press. Folks only talk when they've got room to breathe. She hadn't had that in a long while, he could tell. It showed in how she flinched when the wind rattled the shutters. In how her eyes tracked every corner of the room, like someone used to danger walking in through doors unannounced. That evening he made stew, left the bowl on the table, and didn't watch her eat it, though he listened to the soft clink of spoon against tin. She ate like someone who didn't trust the next meal would come. Later, by the fire, she whispered a name as if confessing it to the coals. Noah. Elias heard it, but said nothing. A man's name. Maybe the father. Maybe the reason she ended up in a stranger's barn with a baby and a fever. She pulled the child closer. Her hands, though cracked and swollen, moved with the tenderness of someone who'd give her life 10 times over for the one curled beside her. "I won't stay long," she said, not looking at him. "Just till she's strong enough." Elias didn't answer right away. He stared into the fire, the flames bending like dancers in the wind. His hands were calloused. His heart, too. But something in him shifted at the way she said she, as if the child was everything. "You can stay," he said finally, quiet as falling snow. The woman's head turned toward him just slightly. Her eyes searched his face, unsure if he meant it. "I don't have much," he continued, "but there's warmth. Wood. A roof." A long silence stretched between them. "Thank you," she said, and those 2 words sounded like they cost her more than 100 might have. Elias nodded once. He watched as she rested her cheek against the baby's head and closed her eyes again. Outside, the wind softened. The snow continued to fall, but not with the same cruel bite. It drifted, lazy now, as if tired from the night's howling. Elias stood, adding another log to the fire. He looked once more at the sleeping girl and her baby. 2 souls stumbled into his life without asking, without warning. But maybe, he thought, not without reason. He turned toward the window, staring into the white beyond. Somewhere in that snow, something had changed. The house wasn't so quiet now, and the silence he'd lived in for so long had been broken not by noise, but by life. The child let out a breathy sigh in her sleep, and Elias McCrae, man of few words and fewer hopes, felt the first crack in the frost around his heart. Just a hairline. But it was there. The days that followed were wrapped in wind and stillness, the kind of cold that made the wood groan in the night, and the sky hang low like a lid on a pot ready to boil. The woman spoke little, tending the baby with quiet devotion, but her silence wasn't empty. It had edges, like glass smoothed by river time. Elias noticed how she kept her back to the door, how she flinched when the floorboards creaked too sharply under his boots, how she never took food first, always letting the child eat before she even touched her spoon. He didn't ask her anything. Words were earned in their world, not extracted. And besides, Elias had learned the hard way that sometimes silence says more than speech. She moved about the cabin as if she didn't want to disturb the air, quick, careful steps, never lingering, never assuming a place. The cradle he'd built for her, carved rough from scrap pine, sat near the fire. She used it, though he noticed how often she pulled the baby back into her arms before sleep fully took them both. The child, Juniper, had stopped crying as much. Her color warmed. She liked the sound of the fire and the feel of wool. Elias caught himself watching the little fist curled tight beneath her chin and wondering how such a fragile thing could anchor a woman so firmly to the earth. One morning, while the sun was still caught behind clouds, Elias stepped outside to fetch water. Snow had hardened overnight, leaving a crust over the world. He cracked it beneath his boots, breath steaming. When he returned, she was standing by the window, back straight, hair damp from washing, holding Juniper against her chest. She didn't turn around. "You don't need to be afraid here," he said, setting the water pail down. "Ain't no one coming." She didn't answer, just rocked the baby gently. He didn't press. Instead, he lit the stove, poured oats into a pot, stirred without speaking. The scent of cinnamon drifted up. It was all he had to offer sweetness. Finally, she spoke. "You say that like you know." Her voice had changed. Low, measured, a thread pulled taut. Elias didn't move. "I don't know much anymore," he admitted. "But I know what a locked door feels like. I know what it's like to wonder if you're safe when you sleep." She turned then. Her eyes were darker than he remembered, not just in color, but in the way they held things. Memories heavy as wet wool. "My name's Maeve," she said. Maeve Rylan. Elias nodded. Good to know. She didn't offer more, and he didn't ask for it. They sat at the table later, eating slowly. Juniper gurgled in her arms, smacking tiny lips. Where's her father? Elias asked softly. Maeve looked past him through the window. Her mouth tightened, and her shoulders lifted like someone bracing for a blow. He was supposed to marry me. Said he would, right up until folks started whispering. Then his father got involved. Her voice thinned. They said I tempted him. That it was my fault. Elias said nothing. The fire popped beside them. He left, she continued. Said I wasn't the kind of woman who could raise a child right. His father made him say it in front of the church. Her fingers stroked Juniper's hair. After that, there wasn't much keeping me in town. Elias watched the way she held the baby, not just lovingly, but like a shield. Like she was still keeping the world at bay. You came through winter to get here? He asked. Maeve nodded. Walked. Took rides where I could. Slept in barns, under porches. One man offered to take me in if I gave him reason. She looked down. I kept walking. The pain in her voice wasn't sharp anymore. It had settled, like snow that's been stepped on too many times. I got family east, but they wrote once, told me not to come. Said it'd bring shame to their name. Shame don't feed a child, Elias muttered. Maeve met his eyes. There was a flicker of something, recognition, perhaps, or the beginning of understanding. Why'd you let me stay? She asked. He didn't answer right away. The spoon in his hand stilled. Because you knocked, he said, even if you didn't mean to. That night, the wind picked up again. Maeve sat near the fire with Juniper asleep against her shoulder. Elias worked on mending the latch on the back window, something he'd been meaning to fix since before the frost came. The warmth between them had thickened. Not love, not yet, but a kind of peace that comes when two people stop hiding from each other. She surprised him then, asking about his wife. Her name was Anna, he said. We were married 6 years. She died trying to bring a boy into the world. Neither of them made it. Maeve didn't flinch or offer empty condolences. She simply nodded, holding her baby tighter. You stayed here, she said, even after. I didn't see much point in leaving, he replied. This land's got my sweat in it. My grief, too. Figured I'd honor M by not letting it rot. Maeve looked down at the cradle, fingers brushing its rough edge. You built this. Elias nodded. It's sturdy, she said. He almost smiled. Meant to be. Outside, the snow eased. The night hummed soft and low. The days began to form a rhythm. Maeve washed clothes by the creek, bundled Juniper in whatever scraps she could find. Elias hunted small game, brought back rabbits and pheasant, and let her decide how to cook them. She was clever with spices, even the few she had. Turned plain meals into something that lingered. The girl who wouldn't speak now hummed when she worked. Only faintly, but it was there. One afternoon, when the sky blushed with the first hint of spring, Elias returned from town with a bolt of fabric and a small tin of peppermint candies. Maeve's eyes widened at the sight of them. He handed her the cloth without a word. For the baby, he said. She ran her fingers along it, lips parted. It was soft, blue as the summer sky that had felt a lifetime ago. Thank you, she murmured, voice nearly lost in the breeze that curled through the open window. It was the first time she'd looked at him not like a stranger, but like someone she might trust. But not all mouths stayed quiet. The next day, Miss Hattie rode up the trail on her mule, claiming she'd come to check if Elias still lived. Her eyes, sharp as goose quills, took in the laundry line, the wooden cradle, the second pair of boots by the door. Well, I'll be, she muttered, dismounting with a dramatic huff. Didn't think you had it in you, Elias McCrae. Taking in strays and sewing cradles. Who is she? Elias didn't answer. Hattie leaned toward Maeve, squinting. You're not from here, that's for sure. Got the look of a girl who ran from something. Her smile was sweet as spoiled cider. A preacher's girl, maybe? Maeve stiffened, but didn't respond. She's with me, Elias said, his voice flat. She and the baby are staying. Hattie's eyebrows shot up like she'd seen lightning strike a tree. Well then, she said, mounting her mule. Words bound to get around. Folks want to know what kind of company you're keeping. They can ask me, Elias replied. Miss Hattie smirked. You've changed, Elias. Grief used to make you quiet. Now you've gone soft. He watched her ride off, her mule kicking up dirt that didn't settle. Maeve said nothing until the sound of hooves vanished. They'll talk, she said. Let them, he replied. She turned toward him then, and something in her expression shifted. Not gratitude, not quite, but a loosening, as if she'd been bracing for shame and found a shield instead. That night, she folded the blue cloth into neat squares, eyes glowing in the firelight. Elias caught himself looking too long. The baby stirred. Maeve bent, lifted her from the cradle, and whispered to her. Nonsense again, soft and musical. Elias closed his eyes for a moment, listening. It had been so long since the cabin sounded like a place where someone belonged. When he opened them, Maeve was watching him. Thank you, she said again. He nodded once. The snow was melting. Slowly. But it was melting. The thaw came slow, hesitant, like a wounded thing learning to trust its legs again. Snow still sat in patches along the fence line, crusted with dirt and time, but the wind had softened. The trees no longer groaned beneath the weight of frost. They whispered instead, tentative and secretive, like they, too, were waking from a long silence. Inside the cabin, the hearth burned steady. Juniper had learned to coo, her voice a tender trill that echoed through the rafters like birdsong returned too early. Maeve smiled more often now, though it came and went like the sun behind the clouds. Her hair grew longer, thicker, curling at the ends where the chill had once broken it. She hummed when she swept. She tied blue fabric into little knots and stuffed them with dried lavender to scent the baby's cradle. Elias watched from the edge of it all. He didn't intrude, didn't make demands. He simply made sure the woodpile never emptied, the porch never iced over, and that the hen that kept escaping the coop didn't stray too far. Some mornings he left coffee on the table with an apple sliced clean. Other times, he whittled toys, quiet things shaped from leftover pine or walnut, things too small for adult hands but perfect for the growing fingers of a child. Maeve noticed. She never said it aloud, but she noticed. The warmth between them didn't rise like fire, it smoldered. One night, with Juniper asleep and the wind soft against the windows, Maeve reached for her sewing and spoke into the hush. You don't ask questions. Elias looked up from his book, eyes shadowed in the flickering light. I figured you'd speak when it mattered, he said. Maeve nodded. She stitched a button with practiced fingers. Her voice stayed steady. I was never going to stay here, she admitted. I planned to leave the second she was strong enough. Figured I'd find a river town, maybe pose as a widow, and find work cleaning linen. He didn't look surprised. But I didn't, she added. No, he said. You didn't. The fire snapped between them, punctuating things that didn't need more words. Juniper stirred in her sleep. Maeve rose, adjusted the quilt, then lingered. She ran her hand gently along the edge of the cradle. Sometimes I still think about leaving, she said. I'd understand if you did, Elias answered. But it's not fear anymore, she said. It's habit. That's what I'm learning. Fear becomes a rhythm, and then you forget what peace even looks like. He watched her as she turned and met his gaze. This place, she said, it's quiet. But not the kind that feels like dying. It's a kind of quiet I can breathe in. The next day, they were snowed in. A storm rolled across the valley before dawn, a final, angry sweep of winter dragging its claws before letting go. Maeve pulled the shutters tight and laid damp cloth at the sills. Elias stoked the fire hotter than usual. Outside, the wind howled, but inside the walls held firm. For 3 days, they lived in a kind of cocoon. Juniper babbled nonsense, while Maeve braided her hair into tiny twirls. Elias read aloud from a tattered book of prairie tales, his voice rough and low, full of gentle pauses. Maeve listened with her chin on her hand, eyes half closed, as if the sound of him reading was a balm she'd never known she needed. They played dominoes. They cooked stew together, Maeve seasoning, Elias chopping. He showed her how to trap heat in a cast-iron pot. She showed him how to sweeten meat with molasses and dried berries. The third night, with the wind finally sleeping, Elias found her sitting at the window, wrapped in the quilt he'd given her weeks ago. She didn't turn when he approached. "I used to dream of a porch swing," she said softly. "Somewhere warm, with peaches ripening. A man beside me who didn't speak much but listened. A baby on my lap who didn't have to earn love." Elias leaned against the frame beside her. The night outside was moonless, but the stars blinked sharp and clear. "Sounds like a good dream," he said. Maeve turned her face toward him. Her eyes were raw, open. "I thought that dream was gone, that I'd lost the right to it." He didn't reach for her. He didn't move. But his voice, when it came, was a whisper carved from something old and steady. "No one loses the right to hope. They just stop being told they're allowed to." Juniper whimpered then, waking from a restless sleep. Maeve rose, kissed her forehead, and rocked her gently. Her voice, when she sang, was shaky at first, then steady. Elias watched her, the weight in his chest loosening. He hadn't touched her once, hadn't asked for anything, but he found himself building things anyway. Another chair, a larger table, stronger shutters for the windows. As if the house was slowly making space for more life. Word traveled fast in quiet places. One morning, Elias came back from the trading post with salt, soap, and the sharp scent of rumor. "Reverend Callahan's kin is riding north," he said. Maeve froze where she stood, spoon halfway to the pot. "He has a son," she whispered. "I know. They'll try to take her." Elias said nothing. Maeve's hands trembled. She set the spoon down and wrapped her arms around her middle. "I don't have papers. No proof. Just a birth and a name spoken to the wind." Elias stepped closer, his voice low. "Do you think he wants her, or just to erase you?" Maeve looked up, fury and fear caught in her throat. "He wants to clean his name," she said. "Pretend this child never came for me. His father will frame it as salvation. A good Christian act. Saving the girl from the harlot who birthed her." Her voice broke. Elias placed the sack of salt down carefully, then turned to face her. "You're not alone this time," he said. She blinked. "I don't have money. I don't have." "You have truth," he said. "You have this land. You have me." Maeve swallowed hard, tears stinging her eyes. "They have power. So do you," he said. "You just haven't had the chance to use it yet." Later, when Juniper was asleep and the night stretched wide, Maeve stood by the fire and spoke again. "I'm scared. I know, but I want to stay." Elias nodded. "Then we'll make it so." She looked at him, light flickering in her eyes. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care?" He didn't smile, didn't say something easy or sweet. Instead, he stepped closer, his voice like earth, deep, quiet, unwavering. "Because I see you. Not the shame, not the story others wrote. Just you." Maeve didn't cry. She just stood there, eyes shining with something like disbelief, like the beginning of trust. The wind had stopped howling. Outside, the last of the snow began to melt, thin rivulets carving paths through the frozen ground. And in the hush that followed, two souls thawed beside the fire, one silent beat at a time. The preacher arrived in a coat too clean for trail dust, with gloves stitched in silver thread and a Bible tucked under one arm, like a weapon. Behind him rode his son, and behind them, a deputy whose mouth stayed shut, but whose hand never strayed far from the butt of his pistol. The carriage bore no insignia, but the horse team gleamed like they'd been fed pride and polished daily. Even their silence felt heavy, like judgment arriving with its boots shined and its papers folded neat. Maeve saw them before Elias did. She was in the garden bed, coaxing early green from thawed soil, juniper tied to her chest in a sling. When the black horses crested the hill, she stood like a woman already sentenced. The color drained from her face. She didn't move, didn't cry out, just reached instinctively for the child and backed toward the house like a shadow seeking cover. Elias stepped out with an axe still in hand. He set it down carefully beside the steps. They didn't dismount. Not at first. The preacher looked older, but not in the way time softens a man. His aging was sharp, knife-edged, lips thin, hair white as ash, eyes untouched by warmth. Noah, on the other hand, looked like someone who hadn't slept in weeks, his hands twitching around the reins. Reverend Callahan raised his voice. We've come for the child." Elias didn't flinch. "She's with her mother." The preacher's mouth curved downward. "Her mother," he said, as if the word soured on his tongue, "is a lost woman who abandoned all moral guidance. She birthed that child in sin and fled the support of our town. We're here to make it right." Maeve stepped beside Elias then, Juniper's weight pressed tight against her chest. Her voice didn't shake. "She is mine. She is loved. There is no sin in survival." Noah shifted in the saddle, eyes darting to Maeve's face then away. There was shame there, and something else, guilt unspoken, spine half-formed. "She's your blood, Noah," Maeve said, eyes on him. "Do you deny her now the way you did when I needed you most?" Noah opened his mouth, closed it. He didn't speak. His father did. "The church has decided," the Reverend said, voice steeled by certainty. "We are filing for custody. The child deserves a respectable upbringing, away from scandal." Elias stepped forward then, slow and sure, like a man used to planting his feet against storms. "This isn't your land," he said. "This isn't your house. You don't make the rules here." "We make the law," the preacher snapped. "The sheriff rides for me." Elias looked toward the deputy, whose eyes darted between them. He said nothing. Guilt had made a home in his posture too. "Maeve has done nothing wrong," Elias said. "She was cast out by men who didn't have the spine to stand by her. She didn't break the law. She was broken by those who used it to cover their cowardice." The preacher's face darkened. "You forget yourself, McCrae. You were a decent man once. A God-fearing man." "I still fear God," Elias said. "But I don't fear you." A tense hush fell. The horses shifted. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk called out over the plain. Maeve's hand brushed Elias' sleeve. "Let them come," she whispered. "Let them try." The Reverend reached into his coat and produced a letter with a seal. Legal paper, official words twisted like thorn vines. "We'll see you in court," he said. "You may hide behind the trees and snow, but this child has blood that demands proper raising. We will not be denied." Then, with a click of his tongue, he turned his horse. The carriage creaked as it moved, and the deputy followed without a word. Noah lingered. Maeve met his eyes one last time. "I gave you the chance," she said, not bitter, just tired. "You ran then. You're still running now." He lowered his head and rode after his father. That night, the cabin was heavy with quiet. Juniper slept soundly, unaware that her fate had been discussed like a possession. Maeve sat at the table, fingers tight around a chipped mug. She didn't drink. She just held it, as if it grounded her. "I was ready," she said finally, "to lose her, to be judged. Again." Elias sat across from her. "That won't happen." She looked up. Her eyes glistened not with tears, but with a fury earned through endurance. "They'll use words to take her," she said. "Ink and seal and polish boots. They'll say I'm unfit because I bled without a ring and raised her without a name." "You're not alone now," Elias said. She blinked, not understanding. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "We'll fight them," he said. "Not with fists, but with truth. With every hand that's seen you nurse her, sing to her, wrap her feet in cloth warmed by the fire. With neighbors who know what kind of woman you are, because they've watched you become it." Maeve shook her head. "They won't listen." "They will," he said, "because I'll make them." It wasn't bravado. It wasn't a promise made for her heart. It was simply said, like he might have said the creek will rise in spring or the fire needs more wood. Maeve looked down at the baby's blanket. Her hand trembled over the embroidery she'd begun, an M and AJ twined together. Half finished, like the life they were building. "I didn't want anyone to fight for me," she murmured. "Not after what it cost the last time I asked." "You didn't ask this time," Elias said. "But I will." Outside, the stars pierced the sky like silver nails. The wind had died, but the earth was stirring. The trees had begun to bud, subtle and slow. A knock at the door broke the hush. Elias opened it to find Miss Hattie, cheeks flushed from the ride, a bundle in her arms. "Thought you might need this," she said, holding out a worn bonnet too small for any grown head. "It was my daughter's once, before the fever took her." Maeve took it with both hands, astonished. I also told the blacksmith, Hattie added. He's got 3 daughters. Says they'll testify you've been nothing but kind. That baby's yours. Anyone can see that. Maeve stared, unsure how to breathe. You're not the only woman this town tried to forget, Hattie said softly. We're still here. As she left, Elias stood behind Maeve, watching as she ran her fingers along the bonnet's edge. Her shoulders shook, but no tears fell. Just breath. Deep, grounding breath. She turned toward Elias. Then we fight. He nodded. The fire between them was no longer small. It was rising. The courthouse sat at the edge of the valley, a square, weather-worn building with peeling paint and windows like narrowed eyes. The air inside smelled of paper and old tobacco, of law laid down in dusty lines that had rarely bent to mercy. Maeve sat on the wooden bench with Juniper in her lap, her spine straight, her breath slow and measured. Elias sat beside her, his hands folded, silent but solid as timber. The room wasn't crowded. Just a few familiar faces, the blacksmith's wife with her knitting tucked under one arm, Miss Hattie with her cane tapping rhythm against the floor, a couple of ranchers who'd seen Maeve carry buckets twice her size and never complain. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their presence was a quiet wall behind her. Across the aisle, Reverend Callahan sat with his son, their suits too fine for this part of the world. Noah wouldn't meet her eyes. The Reverend did. His stare was cold, certain, as if the outcome had already been decided in the church pews, and this courtroom was merely formality. The judge, a thick-shouldered man with deep lines etched into his face from wind and squinting sun, adjusted his glasses. He called for order, though none had been disturbed. We're here today to determine the rightful care and custody of the child, Juniper Rylan, he said, voice steady. Each party will have their say. But I'll remind you, this court honors proof of care, not just claims of blood. The preacher stood first. His words came out like scripture, measured, righteous, heavy with moral thunder. He spoke of legacy, of sin, of a child born out of wedlock, and the need to protect her from a life of wandering and shame. He painted Maeve with the broad strokes of fallen women, unrepentant, unstable, alone. He cited letters of support from church officials far away, none of whom had ever met the child. Then he gestured to Noah. Noah stood reluctantly. His voice was thin, unsure. I didn't know what to do, he mumbled. I was scared. My father, he said it was better this way, that I wasn't ready. Maeve's hands tightened around Juniper's blanket, but she didn't look away. When it was her turn, she stood slowly. The hush in the room deepened. I didn't come here to be forgiven, she said. I came because I stayed, because I gave birth in a barn with no midwife and prayed over every breath she took. I fed her from my body, wrapped her in everything I had left, and walked through snow until my legs bled. Not because I was strong, but because she needed me to be. She stepped forward, closer to the bench. I have no money, no family that'll claim me, but I've got eyes that never leave her, arms that carry her through fevers and fright. And I have a place now, a roof, a fire, and a man who taught me that staying is louder than saving. She looked down at Juniper, then back at the judge. She is not a stain to wipe clean. She is not a mistake to erase. She is my daughter. The room held its breath. Elias stood then. He hadn't planned to, but something in him surged forward like a thawing river. I buried a wife and a son on that land, he said, and I thought I'd buried myself with them. But Maeve brought something back, life, laughter, even grief again. Real grief, not the kind that freezes. I've watched her become a mother every single day. Not once has she faltered. He looked straight at the judge. She didn't need saving. She just needed someone to stand still long enough not to leave her. There was a long silence. The judge tapped his pen against the desk once, twice. I've heard enough, he said. His voice had changed, softer now. This court does not favor reputation over reality, he said. The child stays with her mother. This case is closed. A sound escaped Maeve then, not a sob, not quite a laugh, but something cracked open and holy. Elias caught her as her knees buckled slightly, his arm wrapping around her like it had always belonged there. Juniper blinked up at the room, blissfully unaware, her thumb half in her mouth. The preacher stood, stunned. He looked as if scripture had betrayed him. Noah rose too, but he didn't follow. Instead, he stepped toward Maeve, hat twisting in his hands. "I'm sorry," he said low, "for everything." Maeve looked at him. Her eyes held no fury, no forgiveness, only distance. "Be better next time," she said. "If there's a next time." And that was all. They returned to the homestead before sunset, the wagon creaking beneath them, wheels cutting clean lines through thawed mud. The sky turned gold as they rode, the kind of gold that only comes after storms, when the land sighs and begins again. Elias helped her down from the wagon. He didn't speak, just held out his hand. She took it. Inside, the cabin glowed. The fire snapped in welcome. Juniper babbled as Elias swung her gently in his arms, her laughter bright and high and full of new breath. Maeve stood by the door, watching him, her face unreadable. "You could have walked away," she said quietly. "Would have been easier." Elias looked at her, something flickering in his gaze. "Maybe," he said, "but I'd rather build something than run from what's broken." She stepped toward him, her hand brushing his, slow and deliberate. "I still love him," she admitted. "A part of me does. Or maybe I just loved who I thought he was." "I know," Elias said. "I don't have much left," she added. He smiled faintly. "You have everything," he said. "You just carried it too long alone." Silence bloomed between them, soft and full. She reached for him, not desperate, not unsure. Just a woman choosing, finally, what was hers to choose. Their foreheads met. No kiss. Just the slow meeting of breath and warmth, of two lives no longer flinching. Later, as Juniper slept, they sat beside the fire. The room smelled of cedar and soup and something deeper. Hope, maybe. Or peace. "You still think about her?" Maeve asked. Elias nodded. "Every day. I'm not her. I wouldn't want you to be." She exhaled, the firelight dancing across her face. "I think I might stay," she said. He took her hand. "Then we'll build from here." Outside, spring crept over the hills, green reaching through the cracks, life returning in silence. And inside, where once there had been only ghosts, there was a cradle, a warm fire, and three hearts finally beating at the same pace.